Welcome to the Fatter Wallet Show, because stewardship isn't about being broke.
That's the core idea right there.
On this show, we read the books, we break down the big ideas, and we really try to articulate the best thinking on money, investing, all of it.
Right. Entrepreneurship, strategy, wealth creation.
Exactly. Every single discussion we have is designed to help you stop guessing, and start growing, to build a life of freedom and purpose.
And stewardship. It all comes back to that.
It does. And if you're feeling, well, stuck financially, this is absolutely where you need to be. Because at Fatter Wallets, we don't just talk about money.
No, the goal is mastery.
The goal is mastery. We teach you how to master it. Now, before we jump in, I do want to invite you to grab our courses. They're available at fatterwallets.com.
And they're totally free, right?
100% free. Inside, you'll discover courses like how to pay off your mortgage in just 3 to 7 years using the Velocity banking strategy.
And that's a powerful one. It's all about restructuring debt.
It is. It's a step-by-step method. It shows you how to use your cash flow as a weapon, really, and eliminate loans in record time. And the best part, no earning more money, no working extra hours.
It's about being smarter with the money you already have.
Precisely. And you can also learn how to turn the stocks you already own into weekly income using covered calls.
So you're essentially renting out your shares.
You got it. You learn how to generate consistent premium income and, dramatically increase your ROI. It's a very beginner-friendly options trading course.
That's a game changer for a lot of people's portfolios.
It really is. And all of this, like you said, is 100% free. We just believe financial wisdom should empower people, not be locked behind some paywall.
For sure.
So if you're ready to think bigger, live wiser, and grow a fatter wallet God's way, you are in the right place.
All right, so let's get into it.
Okay, let's. Today, we are looking at the really complex ideas contained in the upside of irrationality.
It's a fascinating look at how human behavior is predictably illogical.
Predictably illogical. I like that, especially when it comes to money. So our mission today is to distill the key insights and focus on how mastering these illogical parts of our nature can give you a massive advantage.
A huge advantage in strategy, in business, in personal wealth creation. I mean, it's an essential exploration. It really challenges that classical economic assumption that people are, perfectly rational actors.
The whole homo economicus idea.
Exactly. The idea that every person always maximizes their gain and minimizes their cost. If you rely on that, your business models, your investment predictions, even your own self-control efforts, they're pretty much doomed to fail.
So these biases aren't glitches.
They are features. They're features that govern everything from how we manage debt to how employees perform at work.
Okay, so let's unpack that right away with something I think everyone struggles with daily: the economics of delay.
Ah, yes. The war between what is pleasant now and what is good for us later.
It's the primary reason most people fail to hit their long-term financial goals, isn't it?
It really is. And this internal conflict, it's inescapable. We are constantly, every day, pitting some immediately gratifying short-term experience against a long-term goal that requires, sacrifice today.
And the struggle isn't that we don't know which one is better.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
We know the long-term goal is better. The struggle is that we consistently fail to execute on the short-term, maybe slightly unpleasant tasks that you need to do to get there.
I think everyone listening recognizes this internal negotiation. It happens the second the alarm goes off.
Oh, absolutely.
Hitting the snooze button instead of doing the workout that will improve your health years from now. Or putting off that complicated paperwork for a business license to watch just one more episode of a show.
Right. We see the long-term benefit, better health, a promotion, a solid retirement. But that short-term convenience or just the immediate gratification, it almost always seems to win.
So what's the core irrationality at play there?
Well, this central irrationality is that we treat our future self as if that person is going to be fundamentally different from who we are right now.
Stronger, more disciplined.
Exactly. We postpone unpleasant but, highly beneficial actions like creating a budget or moving investments or even just cleaning the garage. And we act as if future me will magically have more time, more energy, less stress, and just superior discipline.
It's the scheduling delusion. I'm guilty of this.
Yeah.
You overbook your calendar for today, knowing you can't get it all done, and you just tell yourself, oh, I'll tackle the really hard stuff next week.
Right, as if next week's schedule is going to be magically empty. And in financial terms, this is. It's just devastating. We know we should save 15% for retirement, But the short-term pleasure of a new gadget,
Hmm.
or even just avoiding the effort of planning, it wins.
And the tragedy is that putting it off just makes it a bigger problem later.
It becomes exponentially more problematic. It creates the very future stress we were trying to avoid. So the insight isn't just that we delay, it's that we need some kind of constraint, either external or self-imposed,
Mm.
to force our current weaker self to do what's right for our future self.
That sets the stage perfectly. Now, let's shift to something that feels a little counterintuitive, motivation itself. We tend to assume that more motivation, or say higher financial incentives, always leads to better performance.
Right. More is better.
But the evidence suggests that's not always true, especially when things get complex. High stakes can actually make things worse.
This is what's called the unexpected backfire of high motivation. And you see it most clearly in cognitive tasks, the kind that demand, focused, high-level thinking, the kind of work most of us are paid for.
So knowledge work.
Exactly. When you introduce extreme pressure or very high financial incentives for these complex mental tasks, performance often suffers, sometimes significantly.
We see this all the time with standardized testing, right? Like the SAT or the GRE.
A perfect example, it's a really common observation that people score noticeably higher on those low-pressure casual practice tests than they do on the actual high-stakes official exam.
You'd think the motivation to do well on the real thing would boost your score.
You'd think so, but the intense pressure, it causes a measurable cognitive dip. It's what we call choking under pressure. The psychological load just takes up valuable working memory that you should be using to solve the problems.
That makes me think of public speaking. It's a great analogy.
Oh, for sure.
You practice your presentation alone in your office, and it's perfect. It flows. You know the material cold. But the second you're in front of that important audience,
Everything changes.
your hypermotivation to impress them makes you stumble. Forget your points. I mean, there's that famous story of the executive who was shaking so badly, the laser pointer just created this chaotic light show all over the screen.
Right. And glossophobia, the fear of public speaking, it ranks right up there with arachnophobia. The motivation to perform perfectly becomes the very thing that sabotages the performance.
So there's a performance curve then.
There is. Up to a certain point, motivation helps. But once you pass that optimal point, especially when the incentive is massive, the pressure becomes counterproductive. And this is a major distinction when we think about financial incentives for different kinds of work.
Can you elaborate on that? The difference between, say, physical skills and cognitive skills.
Certainly. In activities that are mostly physical, where success is about speed or dexterity, think about a simple task on an assembly line. High incentives usually correlate directly with a positive return. Pay someone more to do it faster, they generally do it faster.
But when the job demands significant gray matter,
It's a totally different story. When you're talking about complex mental calculations, strategic planning, risk analysis, the relationship breaks down. Banking, legal strategy, engineering, these are purely cognitive.
so a banker isn't necessarily going to make a better decision just because their bonus is 10 million instead of 1 million.
It's highly unlikely. In fact, that colossal bonus might introduce such a debilitating fear of failure that it actually negatively impacts their judgment.
Which brings us right to the financial relevance of this, which was thrown into sharp relief after the 2008 financial crisis. We saw these massive bonuses being paid to executives who had overseen catastrophic failures.
And that created this profound ethical and psychological friction. It really culminated when a congressman publicly asked those highly paid bankers a very pointed question.
I remember this.
He said, at the level of pay that those of you who run banks get, why the hell do you need bonuses to do the right thing?
That question cuts deep. It implies that even just basic competence requires this extra massive bribe.
It does. And what the research tells us is twofold. First, the question itself is based on a flawed assumption that huge extrinsic motivation guarantees high-quality performance, which we know is false.
And
Second, the public outrage points to a deep misalignment between compensation and meaning. If the work is inherently strategic and important, like managing a bank, the motivation should ideally be internal, tied to the mission, not just the bonus. If you need that huge bonus just to ensure basic ethical execution, well, that suggests a total lack of intrinsic motivation.
So if massive financial incentives aren't the magic bullet, we have to look deeper. It suggests that the meaning of the work itself, the purpose, the feeling of contribution matters way more than just the paycheck.
That is the crux of the next major insight. Human motivation comes from layers of meaning that operate right alongside money. We can distinguish between two types: Small M meaning and large M meaning.
Okay, let's define those. That sounds important.
Small M meaning is the immediate intrinsic satisfaction you get from being focused on a task, from completing it, from overcoming a challenge. It's the pleasure of solving a hard puzzle. It's motivation tied to the act itself.
And large.
Large M meaning is the bigger picture. It's the connection of your work to some greater purpose. Developing a cure for disease, serving a community. It's motivation tied to the impact.
And the absence of either one can undermine even the highest paying job. Which brings us to that story about David, the investment banker.
Right. David was, by all objective measures, incredibly successful. High-flying New York firm, phenomenal salary, amazing perks like catered meals, even a laundry service.
Wow.
He was dedicated, spent weeks crafting this brilliant presentation for a major deal. He was genuinely proud of it. He had that small motivation. He loved the craft of it.
But then the deal fell through.
It fell through before he could even give the presentation. His boss sent a quick email. It said something like, "Deal is off, but I looked at your presentation. Fine piece of work. Well done."
So he got the praise, he kept his salary, but he was distraught.
Profoundly distraught. The paycheck was safe, the praise was given, but the work itself was suddenly useless. That was the core psychological injury, the feeling of useless or unrequited work.
He said he imagined his boss just dragging the file to the trash bin.
Exactly. And he realized that high pay alone cannot compensate for a total lack of purpose, or for knowing your intellectual effort was just discarded without ever being seen by its intended audience.
That really highlights how much our effort depends on the expectation of an audience, the idea that someone will eventually see or use what you create.
Absolutely. Think about anyone who writes, a novelist, a journalist. The motivation to spend all those grueling hours on a manuscript is driven by the need to be heard. If you knew for a fact that your work would be locked in a drawer forever,
The motivation would just vanish.
it would vanish. That little number of views counter on a blog post or a company memo, that's a huge psychological driver because it validates that an audience exists.
This realization about meaning leads us right into two really powerful experiments, the Sisyphus effect and the IKEA effect. Let's start with Sisyphus.
Okay. The Sisyphus experiment had people building bionicle robots, the Lego figures. They got paid on a diminishing scale, $3 for the first one, $2.70 for the second, so on. The question was just, how many would they build before they quit?
And the crucial difference was what happened to the robot after it was built.
That was the key.
Huh.
In the control group, you
Wow.
built your robot, you handed it over, and it was placed intact under the table. You knew your creation was still whole.
But in the Sisyphean condition.
Named after the Greek myth of, eternal useless labor.
Right.
In that condition, the moment you handed over the finished robot, the experimenter, right in front of you, immediately took it apart. Put the pieces back in the box for the next person.
So a task was identical, the pay was identical, but the outcome was just constantly being erased.
And the result was stark. The people in the Sisyphean condition, the ones who watched their work get destroyed, they quit building far sooner. On average, they built around 7 robots compared to 11 in the meaningful condition. Performing the exact same task for the exact same pay loses almost 40% of its value when the outcome is just constantly destroyed.
That is a massive difference driven entirely by a sense of purpose. And it has huge implications for the modern workplace.
It really does. Think about the division of labor in big corporations. You fill out endless digital forms, you send them off for approval, you do one tiny disconnected part of a huge task that goes into some black box system. You never see the final product.
Your job becomes a high-paid version of the Sisyphean struggle.
Exactly. Companies, in their drive for efficiency, can inadvertently sabotage the very human need for meaning. And that leads to lower engagement, higher turnover. The lesson for leaders is simple. Focus less on trying to dramatically increase motivation and more on just not actively destroying the meaning that's already there.
Even a small amount of acknowledgement goes a long way.
A very long way. Which brings us to the acknowledgement test.
Right, where even the most minimal human interaction had a huge impact on how much work people did.
This test was just a dull, repetitive task.
Yeah.
Find consecutive S's on a sheet of paper for diminishing pay. And there were 3 groups. The acknowledged group handed their sheet to an experimenter who looked at it, nodded, and placed it in a pile.
Okay.
The ignored group handed it over, and the experiment just put it on a stack without looking at it, or them. And the third group, the shredded group, well, the sheet was immediately fed into a shredder.
You'd think the difference between a nod and silence would be tiny.
You'd think, but it was huge. The group that got that minimal social feedback just a nod, was willing to work much, much longer for less pay. Their output was significantly higher than the ignored group, and even a bit higher than the shredded group.
So ignoring someone's work is almost as bad as destroying it right in front of them.
It is. That tiny social gesture of acknowledgement, it carried enormous psychological and economic weight.
Okay, so if destroying work is ruinous and ignoring it is almost as bad, let's look at the flip side, the IKEA effect. The idea that putting effort into something makes us love it more.
The IKEA effect is all about pride of ownership. When we invest our own effort, physical or mental, into creating or assembling something, we become deeply attached to it, and we tend to overvalue it, often ignoring its flaws.
This explains why the wobbly bookshelf I spent a frustrating Sunday building feels somehow superior to a perfect, pre-assembled one from a store.
Exactly. You look at your wobbly creation and you think, I built that. You see it through this distorted, affectionate lens because of the labor you invested. And this insight actually has roots in marketing history with the egg theory.
Tell us about the cake mix problem.
Early cake mixes in the 50s were, well, too simple. You just added water. And sales were terrible. Psychologists figured out the problem wasn't the taste, it was the lack of personal investment.
It was too effortless.
It was. There was no pride of ownership. Sales only took off when manufacturers were told to leave out some of the ingredients, requiring the baker to add their own fresh eggs, milk, and oil.
That little bit of effort was the key psychological link. It made it my cake, not just a store-bought cake.
It provided the necessary sense of participation. And you see this perfected now with people like Sandra Lee and her 70-30 semi-homemade philosophy. 70% ready-made, 30% your own creative touch. It's the minimum effort needed to feel ownership.
So how does this apply to, say, financial products or business strategy? Customization seems key.
It's huge. Think about Converse, allowing you to design your own sneakers, choosing the colors and materials, or Local Motors, where customers could actually help design and build their own car. In both cases, the customization requires effort, and that effort leads directly to a deeper attachment and a higher perceived value.
Which highlights a real trap for companies that are obsessed with making everything frictionless.
It's a very delicate, counterintuitive trade-off. A hyper-efficient system might use AI to predict your perfect shoe design and just present it to you, effortless. But by removing the effort, you deny the customer the chance for that personal investment, that pride. Overly efficient systems can be psychologically bankrupting.
But there's a really important catch here, right? The origami test showed that effort doesn't always lead to affection.
No, it absolutely depends on the outcome. This experiment had people making origami cranes with really vague, difficult instructions. The people who succeeded under those difficult conditions, they valued their creations the most. The challenge made the accomplishment sweeter.
But what about the people who failed?
That's the key finding. The people who put in all that hard work but failed to complete the task, they valued their mangled results the least. The effort they invested turned into contempt.
So effort increases affection, but only if it leads to successful completion.
That's the rule. Unfruitful effort causes affection to plummet. It's a profound lesson for managers. If you set a high bar, you have to give your team the tools and support to actually finish. Otherwise, all that initial pride and effort just sours into a feeling of failure.
Okay, so from loving our own creations, let's move to loving our own ideas. This is the not invented here, or NIH bias.
The NIH bias is, it's defined by a simple, often unconscious belief. If I, or if we didn't invent it, then it's not worth much. It's a kind of collective psychological ownership that protects the ego of an organization.
And this isn't some modern corporate thing, right? There are historical examples.
Oh, absolutely. Mark Twain wrote a whole essay about it, some national stupidities. He praised this highly efficient German stove, but he couldn't understand why Americans rejected this obviously superior design.
Simply because it wasn't an American invention.
Exactly. Twain said the human race isn't just slow to borrow valuable ideas. Sometimes it just persists in not borrowing them at all.
In the corporate world, this can be disastrous. I think the classic example is Sony.
Sony is a prime example. They were titans of innovation, the Walkman, the Trinitron. But that long history of internal success created a debilitating NIH bias. Their engineers became convinced that only internally developed ideas were good enough.
So they missed huge shifts in the market.
They dismissed the iPod, believing their own proprietary music format was better. They dismissed the Xbox, believing their PlayStation dominance was unshakable. They suffered immense losses because they just couldn't see the value in things they didn't create.
And corporate culture can make this worse, can it? With all the internal jargon and acronyms.
It absolutely reinforces it. Think about all the acronyms, KPI, GAAP, ICRM. They're necessary shorthand, sure, but they also serve a secondary psychological function. They create an inner ring.
An in-group.
Precisely. This specialized language makes internal ideas seem more important, it confers a kind of secret insider knowledge, and it makes external concepts harder to understand or take seriously. It feeds the NIH bias.
Okay, so we're irrational about time, performance, meaning, and our own ideas. Let's turn to a really deep, powerful emotion, revenge, and how that can completely override financial logic.
The instinct for revenge is primal, and it's often totally irrational from a cost-benefit standpoint. When trust is violated, there's this intense desire to make the offender pay, even if it doesn't benefit you financially at all.
And we saw this play out on a global scale after the 2008 financial crisis.
We could frame the bailout in the context of a huge social trust game. The public trusted bankers with their savings, their retirement. When the system collapsed, it wasn't just a financial loss. It was a profound betrayal of moral trust. The feeling wasn't just, I want my money back. It was moral outrage.
And that outrage fueled a desire for legislative action that had nothing to do with economics.
Absolutely. You had lawmakers at the time who anonymously admitted they wanted reforms that were as punitive as possible. They were drawn to ideas that served no real purpose except, as one said, to insult the industry.
Like that proposal to make bank CEOs take credit counseling courses.
It was petty, but it served a deep emotional goal. It was about humiliation, mirroring the requirement for ordinary people filing for bankruptcy. The goal was emotional equivalence. You made us suffer, now you suffer a similar indignity. It just shows how easily revenge can override sensible objectives.
And it doesn't take much to trigger this, does it? The experiments on this are really revealing.
Not much at all. We tested this with a scenario where an experimenter was deliberately disrespectful. While explaining a task, he'd rudely take a 12-second personal phone call, hang up, and then continue without apology.
The annoyance condition.
Right. Then later, the experimenter would accidentally overpay the participant. The act of revenge was simply whether they kept the extra cash.
And what was the impact of that 12-second rude phone call?
It was staggering. In the control group, where there was no phone call, about 45% of people returned the extra money. In the annoyed group, only 14% did.
Wow.
A tiny 12-second act of disrespect just tanked ethical behavior because it triggered this desire for revenge.
And for companies, the critical question is who gets punished? The rude employee or the company itself?
And that's the costly finding. Customers don't differentiate. They punish the company, the principal, even if the offense came from a single employee, the agent. It doesn't matter to the angry customer. They just want someone affiliated with the brand to pay.
So that's why a single bad customer service experience can cause so much damage.
Exactly. So given how easily this powerful, financially irrational vengeance is triggered, what's the antidote?
Is there a magic formula?
There is, and it's startlingly simple. The apology. In a third experimental group, the researcher did the exact same annoying phone call, but immediately followed it with, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have answered that.
And what happened?
The return rate for the extra cash jumped right back up to the non-annoyed baseline of 45%.
So 1 annoyance plus 1 apology equals 0 annoyance.
Exactly. Apologies are incredibly effective at neutralizing that emotional charge, at least in a single interaction. It shows that organizations can mitigate that irrational desire for revenge just by acknowledging the offense.
That is such a valuable lesson. Okay, let's pivot to the final major area, how terrible we are at predicting our own emotional future and how we adapt.
Humans have an incredible capacity for adaptation. Physically, our eyes adjust to a bright or dark room. Emotionally, we adapt to major life changes, both good and bad, much faster than we think we will.
Our failure is in the prediction. We catastrophize.
We do. We catastrophize the future emotional fallout. Think about Romeo, pining for Rosalind, convinced his life was over. Then he meets Juliet and completely forgets her. It's exaggerated, of course, but the psychological truth is we are far more resilient than we give ourselves credit for.
And there was a study on college students and breakups that showed this.
Yes. Students were asked to predict how they'd feel after a hypothetical breakup. They consistently predicted devastating, long-lasting grief. But when the breakups actually happened,
He wasn't as bad as they thought.
their emotional distress was much shorter-lived and less intense than they had anticipated. We consistently overestimate the negative impact of emotional events. This is a huge insight for financial planning and risk.
Yeah.
We might avoid a necessary career change or investment because we overpredict the emotional pain of failure.
We're better equipped to recover than we think.
We are. And we also mispredict what makes us happy over time, again, because of adaptation. We assume if something is pleasurable, a great meal, a new car, we should just have it continuously. But constant exposure actually accelerates adaptation and diminishes our enjoyment.
Which leads to that really counterintuitive finding that interrupting a pleasant experience can make it better.
The massage experiment is a beautiful illustration. One group got a continuous 3-minute massage. The second group got a slightly shorter massage, 2 minutes and 40 seconds. But it was broken up by a 20-second pause in the middle.
And the interrupted shorter massage was preferred?
Significantly. The people who got the interrupted massage not only enjoyed it more, but they were willing to pay twice as much for it in the future. The break refreshed the experience and stopped adaptation from kicking in.
This applies to so many things. Even commercial breaks in a TV show, as annoying as they are, can actually increase our enjoyment when the show comes back.
It's true. The application to life is profound. Happiness is often best experienced in intermittent bursts, not constant saturation. By introducing small breaks, pacing your spending, taking a break from a luxury, we keep revitalizing the positive emotional experience.
That's powerful. This whole discussion just reminds us that aiming for the most rational outcome often ignores the real human drivers, meaning pride, revenge, resilience, that actually determine our success and satisfaction.
It's the ultimate upside of realizing we are delightfully and, well, predictably irrational. And since our happiness depends so much on our ability to adapt, we have to actively manage our environment. The keeping up with the Joneses effect is real. If we surround ourselves with things that make us feel inadequate, we adapt to a lower baseline of satisfaction.
So the final thought here is about being self-aware, about monitoring our internal state.
Absolutely. We have to recognize our own adaptation process, like that metaphorical frog in the slowly heating water. We get used to almost anything: bad traffic, mounting debt, meaningless work. Our task is to learn to, take the temperature of the water internally. When life starts feeling uncomfortably hot, we need to recognize the need for change and jump to a cooler pond. Our happiness really hinges on managing these irrational tendencies and not letting adaptation blind us.
If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to subscribe our YouTube channel, social media accounts, and visit fatterwallets.com for more content, free courses, resources, and tools to help you live wisely and build wealth with purpose.